Okay, you guys voted and... Oh, god damn it. How did I know you were going to vote for the Pouākai? Well, probably because it got second in the last vote, but fine, you'll get your slop. Okay, obviously I'm half kidding. I mean, I even said I've already done this run, so of course I was going to do it at some point. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't have the most to say about this one, to be honest. So essentially the main crux behind this was... I just genuinely had no idea if the Pouākai was good or not. I never see people using it, so obviously that gives me the impression must be bad then. But to be honest, I really haven't used the Beast Handler, like, at all since it came out. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like the Beast Handler was a pretty pitiful addition to the game. Obviously, I don't want to be too harsh on developers because I'm happy they even put a new tower in the game full stop, but man, it is an easy call. The least interesting tower they have ever added to the game is the Beast Handler. One of the biggest problems with the Beast Handler, in my opinion, isn't even the merge mechanic, even though I do think the merge mechanic makes it even more niche and even more a tower that I don't really like using, because I find the merge mechanic really obnoxious, and especially the fact you need to merge 4 tier 4s together to get a tier 5, I think is just extremely infuriating and just acts to make the tower near useless in chimps. But that's not even my biggest problem. My biggest problem, honestly, is the fact that, well, practically none of the upgrades are really different from each other. I mean, think about it. The paths are obviously different, but within each upgrade path, what's the real difference between having a Great White and an Orca? What's the real difference between having an Adosaurus and a Velociraptor? At the end of the day, it's just more of the same. So it feels like while every other tower in the game has 15 upgrades, this tower really only has 3. And then 12 upgrades, which are just more damage and more pierce and more damage and more pierce and more damage and more pierce, constantly ad infinitum. And so that means that I, at least thankfully, know I'm not going to be doing too many videos on the Beast Handler because, well, to be honest, this is frankly the only thing I could think to do with it, is try the Pouākai out. Other than that, I really don't think I'm ever going to be touching this tower again unless it receives some serious changes, because, I mean... what is there to say? The only other thing that I could mess around with is the fact that the T-Rex apparently has actually become a semi-popular option in chimps for dealing with super ceramics, because if you get it to exactly 43 power, it can one-shot all super cerams in the game, and of course the stun ability is quite useful. But that means that it's kind of not an unpopular chimp, so I wouldn't even be doing an unpopular chimps run with it. Okay, I get that I'm spending most of this video complaining about the Beast Handler. Let's talk about the Pouākai itself. So when the Beast Handler first came out, I made my day 1 video, but obviously I was wrong about some things in that video, and one of the things I was wrong about was how the bottom path worked. I got some weird interactions that confused me about how it was supposed to work, and I didn't realize that the spot on the map you were selecting with the targeting reticle was where it would drop the balloons, not where it would do the grab attack. I thought it was where it would do the grab attack because, in my experience, it only used the grab attack when balloons got close to the crosshair, but of course now I know that's only because the balloons would be behind the crosshair otherwise. But I didn't think that was actually the case because I'd actually already seen the tower bug out and grab balloons that are actually behind the reticle and actually push them further forward in the track by accident. Either way, now that I know that, I obviously have a bit of a more positive opinion of the bottom path than I did back when I made my first video on the Beast Handler, saying that while I thought it was the most interesting path, I thought it was also likely the most useless path. Also factor in that the top path obviously was broken then and now is... well, not dead in the water, but definitely not the strongest path. Obviously that means that now seemed like a good time to finally find out, well, was that bottom path actually any good? I mean, I look at it in theory and think, well, it sounds like it should be good. Because I mean, provided that you spread apart your Beast Handlers, it's got near infinite range, and I mean, it's a tower that can see camo, pop lead, it's a tower that has an enormous amount of pierce, so ceramics shouldn't overwhelm it, and on top of all of that, it's really more than capable of destroying every single balloon in the entire game except the battle round 100. So it seems like any strategy that could find a single tower that could be effective for destroying the battle round 100 and combine it with the Pouākai is a strategy that looks set up for success, doesn't it? And so that was my very simple plan. Just chuck all of my power into the Pouākai and just get one thing to make sure that I would obviously be able to deal with the bad on round 100. And beyond that, obviously, I was going to need to get some other towers just for the sake of actually surviving the early game and being able to save up for this thing. But anything I was getting was strictly to survive the early game. Other than that, my first plan was just go all in on that Pouākai. And I'm a bit disappointed because I thought at the very least I could spice this up a bit by making this another combo, where I feature 2 unpopular towers both in the same video combined together. And this one was going to be the Energiser. The logic being that the easiest way to insta-kill a bad is to get level 20 Azili and simply press your Moab Hex to insta-kill the bad. Only problem is that even if you're playing an expert map, Azili does not reach level 20 by round 100. She only reaches level 19, and that's assuming you place her on round 1, which, well, you can't. So, obviously you're not going to get there in time. The only way you could get there in time is if you could get an Energiser to boost the XP gain of the hero and place the hero obviously in the range so that Azili is level 20 before round 100 hits. That way you can use her level 20 Hex to just insta-kill the bad the second that it shows up, and there you go, game's done. This is a combo I always wanted to do anyway, and I honestly think it's a shame that Azili is so weak without being level 20, because I feel like I would use this hero all the time if she was actually good, but she's kind of bad just because of the fact that, well, I feel like in the past all she was really good for was being the absolute queen of free play, using her absolutely busted Moab Hex. But even now, I'm not sure that she is anymore, considering that, well, Heraldo exists now, and if you're going free play, you probably want Paragon Totems more than you want a really powerful Moab Hex. But obviously that's another issue for another time. I just thought it would be cool to do the Pouākai with Azili and Energiser as my combo. Unfortunately for me, I learned the hard way why I'm not allowed to do that. Now, I deleted the footage from my first attempt because it was practically the same as the footage from my second attempt, which is what you're seeing right now. But the only difference on my first attempt was that I tried to get the Energiser first to get more XP value out of it, instead of getting the Pouākai first. And I thought for sure I could afford the Pouākai in time, but no, I underestimated just how much more ludicrously expensive every 5th tier of the Beast Handler is, thanks to the fact that you have to merge 4 4th tiers together just to get the 5th tier unlocked. And that meant that I came up a couple thousand short of the Pouākai by the time round 90 hit. And I thought that I could still get the Condor to pick up DDTs if I just gave it lead popping. But then I realized way too late that I'd already cross-pathed my village out of not getting the middle pass, so I couldn't give it MIB, and I realized the only other way I could give it lead popping was going to be an AMD Alchemist, which the Alchemists don't work on Beast Handlers. So I couldn't give it lead popping. Now, I was stubborn and even still tried to salvage that train wreck of a run, because I did have the idea to try and use Glue Strike to beat the round, since Glue Strike when cross-path with Corrosive Glue actually does very temporarily grant lead popping to all towers, and so I was hoping that would allow me to kill the DDTs, but the Glue Strike was just not consistent enough to help me deal with DDTs, and I just could not get the Pouākai fast enough. And so that run was dead in the water. Obviously this run, the only thing I did differently was that I got the Pouākai first and the Energiser second. So why did this run fail? Well, quite frankly, I was aware I could have died to 95, but I thought the Pouākai could handle it, man. I thought that it might put up a bit of a better fight than this, especially if I simply got it in the right spot and put in the effort to actually micro it and make sure that it didn't miss things. I thought surely it could handle this round. I mean, this thing's amazing for dragging back DDTs, right? Right? Well, no, 95 was our death, and it's quite simply because this bird is fucking stupid. I said it. Even if you sit here and try and micro it, simply I could not get a single run where this bird just flew the right direction. There would just be so many times that this bird would randomly fly across the entire screen, spending like 10 whole seconds not attacking a single balloon just to chase one ceramic. And I try and retarget it to get it to stop, and it basically never works. And I did run after run after run, trying to not get one moment where this bird doesn't just go flying off to fucking Narnia chasing a single red balloon. But no, it would never happen. I couldn't get this bird to just stay in one spot and keep stalling the DDTs no matter what I did. And so eventually, after way too many attempts of constantly resetting and resetting and resetting, eventually I just lost track of all the chaos on screen and let a DDT through without noticing and had to restart. And maybe it was for the best, because I feel like I really would have just strapped myself in for the long haul and just kept going until I finally got the right micro, and so maybe I should be thankful that I died there and just decided to reset the run. And unfortunately, that meant that things had to get a whole lot more boring. So this was the winning run. In this winning run, I replaced the Energiser and Azili, and instead I just got a Preemptive Strike because, well, Preemptive Strike deals with the DDTs and also deals with the bad. And I replaced the hero with Sai because while I did want to use Azili, there's literally no point in using her if I can't get level 20 on her. And so I just picked Sai because while I would have liked to go for something a bit more spicy, at the end of the day, the most annoying thing about that first run was constantly having to micromanage the bird to make sure it doesn't let super ceramics through. And so it just seemed a lot less stressful using the monkey whose whole purpose is to insta-kill super ceramics. So honestly, that's kind of it. But I'm obviously not going to end the video there, so I may as well take this time to talk a little bit about why I chose High Finance as the map to do with this tower. I've actually always been a fan of this map. In fact, it's one of my favorites. One of the only things I don't like about it, though, is the fact that, well, I kind of get there not being much space to start, because, I mean, the whole idea of the map is you don't have much space, but you have to pay to get more space. But I gotta say, the vast majority of these buildings, even once you pay for them, don't even have enough room for the towers you actually want to put on them. Like, there's not enough room for a helipad or a farm or a village on just like half of these buildings. And unless you just bake into your head which buildings actually allow you to place stuff on them and which don't, you'll never know when you buy a building whether you're wasting your money or you're actually going to get some good real estate. And of course, they go out of their way to make most of the buildings that are in good spots on the map the ones that give you the least amount of space and are the least useful. I just feel like it's really tedious having to remember every single spot that doesn't give you the space that you think it does, because they all look like they give you about the same amount of space, and sometimes you'll even see one that seems to clear a huge amount of space, and then you clear it, and then half of the space is taken up by a crane, and another half is taken up by a box, and you've got like 1 pixel to place a tower on. It's a shame, because as I say, this genuinely might have been my favorite map in the game otherwise. I feel like it hits a really nice sweet spot in terms of difficulty, and I really like these maps with the whole gimmick of having very little space, but being able to pay to get more. Not to mention, I really like the layout of this map. I'm fine with multi-lane maps. In fact, generally, I think it's kind of good to have multi-lane maps. I just don't like multi-lane maps which just say, fuck you, we're going to make this a mess of different lanes that don't cross over at all, and just make it so you cannot build any coherent defense that isn't an infinite range one. Whereas maps like this, where it is multi-lane, but the lanes overlap, but just not in ways that are extremely obvious and basically make it no-brainer, put your towers here. I don't know, I feel like it hits a nice sweet spot. And on top of all of that, no joke, for a good 2 or 3 years, I never noticed the whole gimmick of this map. The track is shaped like a $sign. I know most of you already knew, but I know that there's at least a couple of you in the audience who are having the same mind-blown moment I did when I finally noticed. I'm just like, oh my god, how did I play this map for so long, so many times, and never noticed that the map called High Finance is shaped like a $sign. It's so funny because I even like thought to myself, what a weird track layout, but I like it. It's just a weird shape. I never put 2 and 2 together. Anyway, so yeah, the reason I picked the Pouākai for High Finance is because the main thing that I thought is interesting about the Pouākai is that for those of you who don't know, this is actually the case for all of the birds for the Beast Handler, you're actually allowed to pick up balloons from a track and then drop them onto another track they're not even supposed to be on. And that's really, really cool. And obviously that means I would want to use it on a map that's multi-lane, so I can force certain balloons to go onto the lane that I would rather them be on. In this case, while usually the lane that you'd rather the balloons be on would be the longer one, the S-shaped one, I actually want to put it in the lane that just comes down the middle. And the reason for that is while that lane is shorter, it goes right through, well, the center where all my defense is, and generally will make the bird spend less time just wasted flying out to get targets if they're all grouped right in the middle. So actually, I'm going out my way to place everything on the middle lane. I mean, the length doesn't matter that much anyway, since this bird can already basically perma-stun everything that comes its way. Honestly, part of me is a little tempted to completely redo this run, because it is nagging me that I feel like I probably could have still won with Energizer or Azili. I would just have to obviously change my strategy, and I wonder if the money would just barely be there to be able to get either an Icicle Impale or an Absolute Zero to deal with the DDTs, and then just simply accept that I'm going to be getting the Pouākai by like the 90s. And while that's late, honestly, the Giant Condor's so good that, especially if there's an Absolute Zero or Icicle Impale helping it out, maybe that's enough. I don't know. But obviously I'd have to completely redo this run to find out, and it would take a while to get there, and I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I did not enjoy using the Pouākai. I think it's already kind of clear from this video, but my opinion on the Pouākai is, honestly, unironically, if it simply fucking worked, if it simply did its goddamn job, it genuinely might have been one of the best upgrades in this game. It is so good at soloing everything in the game except the bad. And there's plenty of towers that are amazing at just killing the bad, whether it be a First Strike, whether it be a Carpet of Spikes, whether it be a Moab Eliminator, you get the point, whether it be a Cripple Moab. All of these 5th tiers are already amazing enough at specifically destroying the bad, or a Mad, that's another one, although that one's obviously on the pricey side. So I don't think that that's a disqualifying factor, that just because, oh, it can't kill the bad, you can't use this upgrade. It can destroy everything else in the game, and it's genuinely technically got no weaknesses, quote unquote. It would be so good if it just weren't for the fact it never does its goddamn job consistently. It will always hit a point eventually, at some point or another, where its AI has a stroke, and it only needs to happen for about half a second for a Super Ceramic to come speeding through your defense and oh, you're dead. And yeah, I just don't want to deal with that shit in a Chimps run. I'm sorry, I don't want to deal with a tower, which yes, in theory, should be able to destroy everything, but also can just decide to miss sometimes and just let me die. Thanks, Pouākai. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, obviously it can't handle everything alone. You've got to give it some support. You've got to help it out. You've got to catch those leaks and all that. And don't get me wrong, I do try and do that. I understand that. But here's the thing. The Pouākai is ludicrously fucking expensive. It is through the roof pricey to get this thing. And so if you do end up buying a Pouākai, you don't have money to actually get support for it. You don't have the leftover funds to actually prop up the rest of your defense. Your Pouākai is your defense if you're using it. And that makes your life misery because it forces you to play every round like at every single moment. You have to be paranoid that the bird could have a mental breakdown at any moment. And if it does, there goes your entire fucking defense. Better be ready to mash that escape key. Make sure you don't lose those lives. Make sure you don't have to restart all the way back from round 1. This is why I have a huge problem with the Beast Handler requiring 4 tier 4s to be merged into it just to unlock the ability to get the tier 5. Because I genuinely think if you could buy a tier 5 Pouākai with no beasts merged to it, and I understand that the fact it has no merges would mean it's weaker, but if you could do that, I genuinely think the Pouākai could be like an S tier tower. I think it could be amazing. Because it would be an amazing stall that's effective against most balloons in the game while being good damage in its own right, while also only costing just over 30k, which is an affordable amount. It'd be about as much as like a pod or something like that, or an Archmage, which is a good price. The problem is that 32k isn't actually how much the Pouākai costs. Those tier 4s add up fast. Each one of those tier 4s is about like 15,000 to buy in total. Actually, probably something more like 12,000 if I'm being real. Let's just call it 12,000. I'm just estimating. The Condor's like 8,000 and something. The Golden Eagle's like 3,000 and something. Let's just call it 12,000. So if it's 12,000 to get a tier 4 and 12,000 to get another tier 4 and 12,000 to get another tier 4 and 12,000 to get another tier 4, that's 48,000. Then add in the 32,000 of the Pouākai, and that's an 80,000 cost 5th tier. 80 fucking thousand. We're talking about a 5th tier that's approaching big plane levels of overpriced. Genuinely might be cheaper to get a Superstorm than a Pouākai. And when you put that in perspective, wow, does it explain why the Pouākai is such a pain in the ass. And don't get me wrong, the Pouākai is easier to get than the Superstorm, even if they're basically the same in price and power, because, well, the Pouākai, obviously, you are able to still use the giant condors before you get the Pouākai explicitly. And that means, obviously, you're not just sitting on 70,000 cash not spending it. You are putting your money into the tower as you go, which makes it easier to survive to get the upgrade. But it still means that more than half your money in Chimps is just evaporated to this one tower, which is going to defend 90% of the time, but 10% of the time it'll just decide that it wants to watch you die. So yeah, I'm going to be transparent. I absolutely hated using this tower, and I will not be using it in future. Which is really sad, honestly, because that means I genuinely think the Beast Handler now might be officially useless in Chimps. Well, I say that. It's still going to be used for the T-Rex thing I already mentioned at the start of the video. But other than that, I mean, the top path's basically dead, even though it has received some buffs. Still, from what I've seen, it doesn't seem to be very impressive. The bottom path, I've just said in this video, seems to be way too much to invest into something that's just not consistent. It seems like the middle path is the only thing that's even feasible, and you can't even afford a Gigantosaurus in a game of chimps, so you can't even get a 5th tier. You just got to be satisfied being stuck with a T-Rex, and that's all you can get. That's like the only thing you're allowed to do with beast handlers and chimps if you want to actually taking the game seriously. Okay, yeah, if you couldn't tell, because of the fact that I knew I wasn't going to have much to say about the gameplay run itself, I wanted to turn this video into a little bit of a rant about the beast handler itself. I just think there's so much missed potential here, man. I really hope the BTD6 devs aren't losing their, like, touch with new towers. I mean, I was really disappointed with the Dartling gun as well. I really hate to say it, but I just really think that the only good towers that have been added to BTD6 were the Alchemist and the Druid on its launch. I'm obviously glad that the Mortar and the Engineer are here, but honestly, while I think they're fine, I do think they weren't as well executed as a lot of the towers that were there from the beginning. And the Dartling, I feel like, is extremely bland. And I really thought we couldn't get blander than the Dartling, and then we got the Beast Handler. But that's enough Doomer posting. I'm really hoping that the Beast Handler isn't the only tower they plan to add to BTD6 before the end of its life, and I'm really hoping whatever they bring out next impresses me a little bit more. Fingers crossed we get a cool new magic tower, or maybe even just another support tower that's, you know, actually a support rather than a pure DPS tower they just decided to put in support because we don't have enough support towers. Well, we do, it's just that the support towers, the Ice Monkey and the Glue Monkey, are in Primary for some reason. Well, like, I get why Ice is in Primary, it's from BTD1, but why the fuck is Glue Gunner in Primary? Glue Gunner's from BTD4. That's not a primary tower at that point. Oh god. Yeah, the tangents are getting too crazy. This is probably where I have to end the video. I did kind of play up the tangents a little bit on purpose for the sake of making this a bit more interesting and a bit less of a nothing burger, but maybe I've gone a little bit too far at this point. With all that said, thank you for watching. I'm sorry if you were hoping I would have more positive things to say about the Beast Handler, because I know that a lot of casual players especially really like the Beast Handler, but I'm just gonna be real with you, man. I fucking hate the tower, and I mainly wanted to use it because I gave it such little of a chance ever since it came out that I thought maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. Maybe if I use this upgrade path in a game of chimps on a map which makes sense for it, and I really put the effort into it, it's going to impress me, but it just really hasn't. But as I say, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Once again, make sure to vote on it, and vote for a better one this time.